Chapter 1496. After walking around, Gu Xingyin found that the washroom in this place was really hard to find. She could only helplessly call the system. System, give me a GPS. Gu Xingyin thought that she was probably the first person to ask the system to do something like this. After coming out of the washroom, Gu Xingyin finished washing up and drove her mermaid scooter outside. The design of this gene matching center led to a long corridor after coming out of the washroom. With the mermaid scooter's normal speed, it would take about 5 minutes to walk. Gu Xingyin slowly walked towards the exit. At the same time, on the other side, 2 people wearing the Empire's military uniform were slowly walking in this direction. The person in the lead had sculpture-like facial features and a cold aura. At this moment, he was frowning, his sharp eyes impatiently listening to the person beside him. Marshal, Madam has already urged you countless times to find time to come here for a gene matching you. He coldly interrupted the adjutant beside him. Okay, Yashi, we came here today for official business, not for my private life. Adjutant Yashi muttered. If Marshal is willing to spend some time on your private life, I believe the entire empire will be very happy. Raymond raised his eyebrows. He stopped and looked straight at the adjutant with hawk-like eyes. What did you say? The poor adjutant Yashi was silent for a moment under his commanding officer's extremely oppressive aura. In the end, he was defeated and said, Marshal, I didn't say anything. Raymond nodded in satisfaction and continued to walk forward. Yashi followed behind him with a dejected expression. He had been the marshal's adjutant for 3 years. When the marshal was still a general, he had been his adjutant. However, even after following the marshal for so many years, he still couldn't resist the marshal's terrifying aura. Whenever Marshal Raymond was unwilling to do something, he would coldly stare at the other party without saying a word. Under normal circumstances, there were very few people who could resist the marshal's aura. Just like the matter of finding a partner, Madame Raymond had said many times that although the marshal wasn't old, he wasn't young either. He had long reached the age where he should find a partner. But for some reason, Marshal Raymond didn't care at all about the gene matching that so many officers in the military were looking forward to. He even had some resistance. As his adjutant, Yashi wasn't only talked about by the Redmond family. Even His Majesty had privately looked for him and asked him to advise Redmond more. Obviously, they all knew that with Sir Raymond's personality, it was impossible to force him. They could only use persuasion and let him take the initiative to do the gene matching. As Marshal Raymond's most trusted adjutant, Yashi carried the hopes of many people on his shoulders. However, Yashi's adjutant, you think I'm too important? If the marshal didn't change his mind, even 100 Yashi wouldn't be able to persuade him to change his decision. Yashi looked up and saw that the marshal had already walked to the front. He came back to his senses and hurriedly quickened his pace to follow behind him. However, Sir Raymond suddenly stopped in his tracks. Chapter 1497. Did something happen? Yashi was confused. He looked ahead with some doubt, but his eyes widened in an instant. Not far in front of the two of them, there was something that was obviously a mermaid's vehicle that was slowly moving in their direction. Yashi's attention was completely attracted by the petite figure. Heavens! How could there be such a delicate and cute little guy in this world? The people of the Empire who had undergone genetic modification were usually taller. In comparison, mermaids were much more petite. That was why Yashi called her a little guy. Yashi looked at the beautiful mermaid slowly walking towards him, and felt as if he had been shot by the arrow of the goddess of love. She was really beautiful. Gu Xingyin saw 2 figures standing in front of her. She looked towards them and saw a very familiar figure at first glance. That man had a tall and straight body. He was wearing the uniform of the Empire's military, with shiny black military boots on his feet, revealing 2 straight and slender legs. The buttons on his jacket were tightly buttoned to the top. He was obviously a very old-fashioned and serious man. Looking up, it was a handsome face that could make all the mermaids in the Empire go crazy. Of course, the reason why they went crazy wasn't just because this face was handsome, but because this face belonged to Cager Raymond. When Gu Xingyin looked at him, she found that the other's eyes were also on her body. Those deep and bottomless black eyes were calmly staring at her, without a trace of emotion. So Gu Xingyin changed from secretly looking at him to openly looking at him. She also very generously nodded to Raymond. Then she saw the baby-faced adjutant behind Raymond. The baby-faced and delicate adjutant was looking at Gu Xingyin in amazement. When he saw Gu Xingyin's gaze, his face turned red. He tried to appear calm and showed a graceful smile to Gu Xingyin. Quite a cute person. Gu Xingyin couldn't help but chuckle when he saw how calm the adjutant was, even though he was clearly nervous. She gave a very friendly smile to Yashi's adjutant. Yashi expressed that his heartbeat didn't belong to him anymore. Soon, the cute little mermaid left the place and went to the front hall. Yashi said with an expectant face, "I think I'm favored by the goddess of love. Marshall, did you see? Such a cute mermaid. Why don't you do a genetic match and quickly take one home?" In the Empire, merit points were needed to apply for a mermaid. Yashi didn't have enough merit points, so he could only wait. He liked mermaids very much, so he didn't understand his commander's strange temperament. Raymond didn't say anything. Yashi didn't notice that something was wrong and continued talking to himself. That little mermaid just now, she's as beautiful as an angel. I bet she's not an adult yet. Otherwise, those guys from the military would have already. I have to work hard to earn merit points. Hehe. While Yashi was laughing foolishly, Raymond coldly said, "Adjutant Yashi, we're here to work today." Yashi quivered and immediately straightened his expression. "Yes, Marshal." Chapter 1498. The two continued to walk forward, but after a while, Yashi couldn't help but laugh again. "She smiled at me before. Did you see that, Sir Marshal? Do you think she likes me too?" Raymond suddenly stopped and said in a deep voice, "Colonel Yashi." Yashi's body trembled. Every time the marshal called him by his rank, it meant nothing good was going to happen. Sure enough, Raymond's next words made his knees go weak. "You have so much free time to think about other things when you're working. Double your physical training when you get back." As the marshal's adjutant, not only did he have to be outstanding in all aspects of communication, he also had to be a bodyguard sometimes. Therefore, Yashi never slacked off on his physical training. His training schedule was personally set by the marshal, and in the entire military, it could be considered one of the strictest. Double. Yashi felt that he might not be able to see the moon tomorrow. Raymond's threat was obviously very effective. For a long time, Yashi's head drooped. He didn't recover until he got on the hover car and returned to the military. When he got on the car, he still didn't give up and asked Raymond, "Marshal, you were just joking, right?" Raymond's thin lips lifted. "When have you ever seen me joke?" "Yashi." After returning to the military, Raymond sent Yashi away and dialed a number. "I need to find information on a mermaid." "Sir, this is against the rules." Raymond's voice was cold. "Underage, blonde hair, blue eyes, blue tail. Went to the genetic matching center today. I need the results before tonight." He didn't wait for the other party to speak and directly cut off the call. After the call ended, Raymond looked out the window and couldn't help but think of the little mermaid he met this afternoon. When he first saw the little mermaid, even if Raymond didn't want to admit it, his eyes couldn't help but follow her from beginning to end. There seemed to be something special about the little mermaid that attracted him. After thinking for a while, he withdrew his gaze and lowered his head to deal with the military matters. Soon the call rang again. The other party spat out the information he wanted word by word, and at the end he even attached a thin document. Redmond stared at the front page of the document for a long time. The blonde mermaid was smiling brightly. Deanna. Leonard. Gu Xingyin and Sophia returned to the mermaid school together. When they returned to Sophia's room, she gently tugged on Gu Xingyin's sleeve. Her eyes were filled with excitement. Seeing her like this, Gu Xingyin roughly knew that the result of the genetic match should be what she liked. Sure enough, Sophia looked happy. She quietly moved closer to Gu Xingyin's ear and said, "My match is out. It's Earl Allen. Our genetic match is 89%. Earl Allen was considered a new noble among the nobles of the empire. He was young and promising, and was greatly appreciated by His Majesty. His future could be said to be limitless. Of course, to Sophia, there was one more thing. This Earl Allen had a handsome face that suited her taste very well. Gu Xingyin smiled and said, "Congratulations." A match of 89% was considered extremely high in the entire empire. There were almost no accidents. The two of them would be the most compatible and most suitable to become partners. Chapter 1499. Hearing Gu Xingyin's blessings, Sophia was obviously very happy. She rested her cheeks on her hands and looked at Gu Xingyin. "Diana, you're almost an adult, right?" Gu Xingyin nodded. "I still have 2 months." Sophia's eyes lit up. She looked at Gu Xingyin and seemed to be very excited. "I'm really curious. Diana, who will be a suitable match for you?" Sophia looked at the simulated starry sky on the roof and said expectantly, "You're the most outstanding mermaid in our batch. You'll definitely find the most outstanding partner." Gu Xingyin laughed softly. She didn't tell Sophia that she had already found that person. Audrey was about the same age as Sophia. Less than a week after Sophia's test, Audrey had also gone to the genetic matching center accompanied by her family. Everyone could see that Audrey was in a very good mood. Even when she saw Gu Xingyin, she didn't show a bad expression. Sophia looked at Audrey with a puzzled expression as she walked over with a charming smile on her face. She seemed to be surprised that Audrey was so easy to talk to today. Gu Xingyin guessed that Audrey probably already knew the results of the genetic matching, and knew that her genetic compatibility with Prince Jonathan was 88%. For Audrey, who had always had a crush on Prince Jonathan, nothing could compare to this good news. Sophia also knew that Audrey had gone to the genetic matching center. Seeing her like this, she guessed, could it be that Audrey really likes the person she's matched with? Gu Xingyin didn't want to talk about this kind of thing, so she smiled and said, "Maybe." For the next 2 months, Gu Xingyin's days were rather dull. Just like before, she finished her studies on time every day. During her breaks, she would go out with Sophia and the others and go home to reunite with her family. However, there was one person who saw all of her movements. Raymond didn't know why he would do such a thing. He had only seen the mermaid once, and the two of them had only exchanged a glance. They hadn't even spoken a word. However, ever since he returned, the figure of the mermaid flashed through his mind from time to time. This made him a little upset. Unfortunately, Yashi was not afraid of death. Every few days he would show up in front of him. It would have been fine if it was just him, but every time, he had to express his longing for the little mermaid that he had only met once and didn't even know her name. Raymond sneered. It must be because the training he gave him was not intense enough. Poor Yashi. In just 2 months, he was living a life worse than death. Even the baby fat on his baby face had disappeared. He knew that his superior was dissatisfied with him in some way, but he was too embarrassed to ask. But no matter how much Yashi thought about it, he would never have thought that the reason he was so miserable for the past 2 months was actually because of his vague desire for the little mermaid whose name he didn't even know. On this day, Redmond's communicator rang. The message sent by the other party made his pupils shrink. Diana had reached adulthood and would be undergoing genetic adaptation at the Genetic Matching Center in 2 days. Today for chapters. Tomorrow, there will be a 24-hour free reading event on QQ. Next, here comes the important part. The day after tomorrow on the 13th, that is Monday 100 chapters. There will be an explosive release in the early morning. I hope that baby can support Gaolingji. I especially want to ask for subscriptions. According to the subscription situation, on the 14th, that is Tuesday, there will be a second release of 30 to 50 chapters. So in total, there will be about 150 chapters. I hope that everyone can support Gaolingji. Moi. Also, don't forget to ask for monthly tickets. Chapter 1500. Marshall, haven't you always had a bad impression of the Genetic Matching Center? The straightforward adjutant Yashi expressed that he didn't understand the marshal's decision to go for an inspection today. Redmond glanced at him lightly, and Yashi immediately shut his mouth. All right, since it was the marshal's decision, he just had to listen to him obediently. Raymond didn't bring many people for this inspection, but when the staff of the Genetic Matching Center heard the news, they treated it as a very serious matter and received it. Then when Raymond's hover car stopped, It happened to meet Leonard's family, who also stopped at the entrance of the genetic matching center. Raymond's eyes immediately fell on Gu Xingyin. The little mermaid was wearing a light blue dress today. Well, it matched her eyes very well. Raymond silently said in his heart. He also saw Gu Xingyin's snow-white legs outside the dress. Obviously, this little mermaid couldn't wait to try walking with her feet when she could transform her legs. Jason, who was standing beside Gu Xingyin, saw Raymond and his eyes instantly lit up. He looked at Redmond with a burning gaze, and his face was flushed with excitement. After thinking for a while, Jason still couldn't hold back and walked towards Raymond. Yashi immediately stood in front of Raymond to protect him. Although this person seemed to have a close relationship with the Little Mermaid, the commander's safety must be the first priority. Jason seemed to realize his actions were abrupt. He stopped at a relatively safe distance, and his eyes lit up as he saluted Raymond. Marshal Raymond, I am also a soldier of the Empire. You have always been my idol. Yashi silently looked at Jason's shining eyes. Well, his commander's fans were all over the Empire. It was really troublesome to meet admirers everywhere. Yashi thought that Sir Raymond would ignore this person. Because usually when faced with this kind of situation, his Sir Marshal would coldly nod and walk away. Then he would leave the poor adjutant to use a smile to comfort the frozen hearts of his admirers. But obviously this time, Alexei was wrong. Because he saw Sir Raymond stop and greet the young man named Jason. Raymond knew who this man was. Jason Leonard, Deanna Leonard's second brother. Behind him was Leonard and his family. They were probably here today to accompany Deanna in the genetic matching. She said casually. What are you doing here? Does anyone in the family need a genetic match? When Jason heard that his idol actually took the initiative to chat with him, he was so excited that he was almost incoherent. He hurriedly nodded. Yes, Marshal Raymond. My sister, Deanna, is an adult. Today, our whole family is accompanying her for the genetic matching. As he spoke, he turned to look in the direction of Gu Xingyin. When Raymond heard him talk about Deanna, his face was full of pride. Sure enough, as the information said, the little mermaid was a treasure in the hands of the Leonard family. He glanced at her face openly, and then said, I wish the little girl good luck. Jason's face showed a smile, obviously very happy. Thank you for your blessing, Sir Marshal. Then, I won't disturb you. He was obviously very good at reading people's expressions, and he could see that Raymond still had something to do. Raymond nodded and didn't look in the direction of Gu Xingyin again. He directly walked through the door under the respectful gaze of the staff. Chapter 1501. When Jason returned to Gu Xingyin's side, he was so happy that he was about to fly. Fortunately, Leonard's entire family knew of his fanatical worship of Marshal Raymond, so they didn't find it strange to see him so excited, which was completely different from his usual indifference. Gu Xingyin glanced at him and said with a smile, Second brother, why are you so happy? Jason tried his best to keep a straight face and nodded solemnly. You can't understand my feelings, Deanna. Gu Xingyin shook her head and laughed. When they came to the genetic matching center, there were already staff waiting there because they had already informed them in advance. During the genetic matching, other people couldn't go in with them. Casey reached out and hugged her daughter nervously. Deanna, don't be afraid, we are all here waiting for your good news. Gu Xingyin listened to Casey's slightly rapid heartbeat and laughed in her heart. Who was the nervous one? She followed the staff to a pure white place where many instruments were placed. Dear Miss Leonard, we first need to do a full body examination for you. Raymond sat at the top and listened absent-mindedly to the official in charge of the genetic matching center who was reporting to him. Damn it! He had no interest in these so-called biological sciences at all. The official's mouth was dry, and after he finished speaking, he lowered his head slightly and waited for the marshal's instructions. However, for a long time he didn't hear any sound from the top. The official couldn't help but quietly raise his head and look at the marshal. Raymond was frowning as if he was thinking about something. Was the marshal not satisfied with his performance just now? The official broke out in a cold sweat from the conjecture he had made up. He thought for a moment and said carefully, Sir Marshal, do you think there's anything we need to improve on in our work? Dead or alive, at least give me a definite answer. Raymond came back to his senses. In fact, he was completely distracted just now and didn't listen to what this person said at all. Even if he listened, this person kept talking about amino acids and chromosomes. As a graduate of the Empire's military academy, he really wasn't good at it. At last Raymond opened his mouth to the officer's expectation. But what he said had nothing to do with the report just now. I see that there are several mermaids who came for genetic matching today. The official from the genetic matching center was stunned when he heard this. He thought to himself, does the marshal mean that he wants to see our practice? Fortunately, he had done his homework and quickly said, yes, Sir Marshal. Today, 2 mermaids who have just reached adulthood will come to us for genetic matching. Raymond said calmly, oh, are the results out yet? The official's heart skipped a beat as he said, it's still being tested, but it should be about time now. Raymond placed one hand on the table and tapped it with his index finger. He didn't say anything. The official was suddenly enlightened. He said, do you need to take a look at our matching results? He was just taking a gamble, but he didn't expect to see approval in the marshal's eyes as soon as he finished speaking. The official was relieved. Although he didn't know what the marshal was planning, he still hurriedly asked someone to bring over the 2 latest results. Chapter 1502. Raymond looked at the 2 thin pieces of paper with an indifferent look on his face. He casually took one and glanced at it. Well, it wasn't Deanna. The name of the person from the Empire who matched her seemed a little familiar, but Raymond couldn't remember it at the moment. That wasn't important. Raymond glanced at it roughly, then picked up another piece of information as if nothing had happened. With just one glance, his pupils shrank. Deanna Leonard's genetic compatibility with Jonathan, Prince of the Empire, had reached an extremely high 93%. With a genetic compatibility of more than 90%, the probability of the offspring being able to give birth to a more outstanding offspring could almost reach 80%. Raymond and Jonathan had a good relationship. Seeing that the other had found the most suitable mermaid for himself, he should be happy for him. However, Raymond didn't think so at the moment. He felt as if there was a fire burning in his heart. He wanted to impulsively tear the information in front of him to shreds, wanted to reject this conclusion, in fact, what he wanted to do most was to replace the name next to Deanna's on the information with the highest genetic compatibility with his own name. His heart suddenly relaxed. So that was what he was thinking. No wonder his mind couldn't help but be attracted to the little mermaid named Deanna at first sight. No wonder he couldn't help but think of her appearance after the first time they met. So it wasn't because of some damn special attraction, but because he had fallen in love with that little mermaid. But now, this little mermaid's genetic compatibility with someone else had reached an extremely high 93%. And that person was a very good friend of his. Raymond's eyes darkened. Jonathan, I'm sorry. He would never let go of the person he liked, no matter who the other party was. So his thoughts were only for a moment. In the eyes of others, the marshal took the 2 pieces of information and casually glanced at them, then didn't say anything. The official began to ponder the marshal's meaning again. Then he heard the marshal nonchalantly say, Jonathan has waited for so many years and finally, a mermaid with a very high genetic compatibility with him has appeared. The official obviously knew that Prince Jonathan and the marshal were friends. Hearing this, he thought Raymond was happy for His Highness the Prince. He nodded and said, Yes, Marshal. Speaking of which, this is the second mermaid that His Highness Prince Jonathan has encountered in the past 3 months with an extremely high genetic match. Raymond raised an eyebrow. Oh, the official could tell that His Excellency the Marshal seemed to be interested in this, so he quickly continued. Previously, a mermaid who had just reached adulthood came here for a test, and the result was that her genetic match with His Highness Prince Jonathan was 88%. As you know, this is already an extremely high degree of compatibility. Raymond nodded. Although he had never been interested in this, there were several elders in the family who were very concerned about this. They had been nagging him about this, and even if Redmond didn't want to understand, he already knew the basics. The official added, However, this young lady from the Leonard family is clearly more genetically compatible with His Highness Prince Jonathan. In terms of family background, she is more compatible with His Highness the Prince. Chapter 1503. This sentence made Redmond's mood turn sour again. Adjutant Yashi, who was sitting on the other side, was also shocked. God, what did he just hear? That cute little mermaid of the Leonard family actually had a very high genetic match with His Highness Prince Jonathan of the Empire? Yashi felt that the little flame of his first love that had ignited in his heart was ruthlessly snuffed out. He was still waiting to work hard to earn merits. But what about the gene sample he was going to provide here? He didn't expect that before he could do anything, the beauty no longer belonged to him. Adjutant Yashi silently shed a tear for his lost first love in his heart. Then he heard the cold voice of his superior. Get ready, take me to the gene bank in 10 minutes to draw a gene sample. Yashi was about to take a sip of the tea, but when he heard this, he almost dropped the thing in his hand. He looked at Raymond in shock. Sir Marshal, what did you just say? The Gene Matching Center official was also as shocked as him. His eyes widened as he looked at the calm Marshal Raymond. Everyone in the Empire knew that the #1 Prince Charming of the Empire, Marshal Raymond, had never gone to the Gene Matching Center to provide his gene sample. He didn't seem to be interested in this way of genetic matching. But just now, what did he hear? After a brief moment of confusion, the official suddenly felt like a pie fell from the sky and hit him. Marshal Raymond was going to provide a gene sample, and it was going to be done by his own hands. The official felt like he could already see the praise of all the superiors in the Gene Matching Center, as well as a promotion and a bright future at the peak of his life. He couldn't hide his excitement. He quickly turned on the communicator and ordered something. Then he said to Raymond, Sir Marshal, you can come with me now to draw a gene sample. Raymond nodded and got up from the chair. Yashi's mind was blank as he followed them until they arrived in front of a sealed metal door. He was stopped by someone. No unrelated person was allowed to enter this place. Yashi sat down on a chair on the side. Then his brain that had stopped spinning slowly began to operate again. He seemed to have finally digested the fact that his commander was finally willing to accept the matter of genetic matching. The next moment he thought of more things. From now on, no one would pat him on the shoulder and say, "Young man, as the adjutant, you have to persuade Raymond," and so on and so forth. Adjutant Yashi felt that his broken heart seemed to have been healed by this matter in an instant. Regardless of whether the marshal made such a decision on the spur of the moment or for any other reason, Yashi felt that it didn't matter. The reason wasn't important. What was important was the result. Now at this moment his superior was undergoing gene extraction in the Gene Matching Center. She didn't know what kind of mermaid would be genetically compatible with someone as outstanding as the marshal. Gu Xingyi's face suddenly flashed across his mind. Such a lovely and beautiful Miss Leonard, if she stood next to His Excellency the Marshal, wouldn't it seem particularly harmonious? After thinking for a while, he shook his head. According to the official's words just now, Miss Leonard seems to have an extremely high genetic match with His Highness Prince Jonathan. Today is the 4th watch. On the 12th, which was today, there was a 24-hour QQ reading of the book, starting at midnight and ending at midnight. Early in the morning of the 13th, more and more. Gao Lingji had been saving the manuscript for a month or two, and she had promised to update it for a long time. It was tomorrow. Here, I'm asking for another wave of book coins subscriptions. If you read the book coupons, it doesn't count as a subscription. The subscription on the day of the update is very important. It will affect the recommendation of this book later. I hope everyone can buy the book coins to support Gao Lingji. On the 13th, I hope we won't leave until we see each other. Good night. Chapter 1504. Adjutant Yashi didn't know what percentage the genetic match between Miss O. Leonard and Prince Jonathan was, but from his tone, it was much higher than 88%. Such a high genetic match was almost impossible to surpass. Alas! Adjutant Yashi looked at the snow-white wall above and thought to himself, I don't know when I'll be able to gather enough merits to find the mermaid I'm destined to meet. About an hour later, the metal door finally opened. Raymond still looked the same, meticulously dressed in his military uniform, and there was not the slightest emotion on his face. The official on the side was still talking to him. We will conduct a detailed analysis and comparison based on your genetic data, and then begin to match with the mermaid genes in the existing gene bank. The result will take about 3 days. And if there is a match with more than 80%, we will inform you immediately. Raymond nodded with a cold expression, and then suddenly asked, "Have you informed Prince Jonathan of the result?" The official froze for a moment before realizing what Raymond meant. He shook his head. "We haven't informed His Royal Highness Prince Jonathan of today's result yet." Raymond opened his mouth slightly, but in the end he didn't say anything and turned to leave. Yashi hurriedly followed him. When they returned, Yashi finally couldn't help but ask curiously, "Sir Marshal, why did you suddenly want to advance the gene extraction today?" Raymond's expression didn't change. "I just felt like it." Yashi, okay. He secretly thought to himself, could it be that his Sir Marshal saw that His Royal Highness Prince Jonathan had found a mermaid that matched him and was jealous? It had to be said that Adjutant Yashi's imagination was sometimes very powerful. From a certain point of view, he had guessed correctly. At this time, the Leonard family was feeling quite complicated. The mermaid gene matching procedure was relatively simple, so the result could be known on the same day. The Leonard family now knew that Diana's genes had reached a 93% match with His Royal Highness Prince of the Empire. His Royal Highness Prince Jonathan was one of the famous golden bachelors of the Empire. It was said that he had a very gentle personality and was very popular with mermaids. He was a very good husband candidate. And Prince Jonathan's status was noble, so Diana didn't need to marry him. No matter how you looked at it, it was a good result. But the people of the Leonard family were still a little unhappy. It was rare to find a suitable match on the first day of providing a genetic sample. Sophia's situation before was already very rare. Most mermaids could still enjoy a period of freedom after they reached adulthood. The Leonard family originally thought that Diana would be able to stay at home for a while. In the absence of a successful genetic match, it was normal for mermaids to stay in the family. But under normal circumstances, if they had already found a suitable match, they would basically choose to be together, or even enter the marriage hall. The little princess that he had painstakingly raised was about to be snatched away by the big bad wolf when she had just reached adulthood. This was what all of the Leonard's family at this moment. The prince, who was dealing with official business in his mansion, also received a message from the Genetic Matching Center. Chapter 1505. Diana Leonard? The average lifespan of the empire had reached 500 years, and Prince Jonathan, who was only in his 40s, was undoubtedly still very young at this time. He had golden hair unique to the Casso royal family, and his dark brown eyes seemed to be full of gentleness when he looked at people. Prince Jonathan was a completely different kind of handsome man from Raymond. If Raymond was described as cold as ice, then Prince Jonathan was like the warm sun on a winter's afternoon. Jonathan had received the news from the Genetic Matching Center before, and he had specially investigated Miss Audrey of the Menlo family. She was a rare beauty, but Jonathan was not very satisfied. Because according to his investigation, Miss Menlo seemed to be a very arrogant beauty with a bad temper. It was said that she often got angry and was a little irritable. This kind of personality was completely different from the ideal partner in Jonathan's heart. Prince Jonathan, who had a soft and gentle personality, wanted to find a partner with similar interests and hobbies. He liked gentle and lovely lilies, not thorny roses like Miss Menlo. Therefore, even though his genetic compatibility with Miss Monroe had reached 88%, Prince Jonathan didn't do anything for 2 months. He still had a glimmer of hope and wanted to wait and see. Of course, if there really was no one with a higher genetic match than Miss Menlo within a year, Jonathan might still choose to marry her. Because the imperial decree was there, and the royal family would definitely not let him give up a wife with a high genetic match, and choose a princess he liked who might not be able to give birth to a perfect genetic heir. So when he learned the latest news from the Genetic Matching Center, Jonathan was delighted. He was very curious about this mermaid, who was so genetically compatible with him. In the Casso Empire, if the genetic match between the two parties could reach more than 90%, they would basically be called a match made in heaven. Without any delay, he immediately ordered his subordinates to look up Miss Leonard's information. The results made him happy. Jonathan looked at the enlarged photo on the first page of the information. The girl in the photo had an exquisite and beautiful face like an angel. She smiled slightly, and the happiness in her big dark blue eyes seemed to fall on Jonathan's heart through the photo. With just one look, Jonathan knew that this was a girl with a gentle heart. Then he read the pages one by one. Jonathan read it very seriously. By the time he finished reading the information, a smile had already appeared on his face. I seem to have found a treasure that belongs to me. He chuckled softly. After thinking about it, he dialed a number. Go and check Miss Leonard's recent whereabouts. Yes, it's the Leonard family in the capital. Jonathan's gaze once again fell on the photo on the front page of the document. He couldn't wait to see that adorable little mermaid. 2 days had passed since the end of the genetic match. It was another rare day of rest. Gu Xingyin was awakened by Sophia's call. Sophia looked at the dazed Gu Xingyin and smiled. The weather is good today. Shall we go out for a walk? Chapter 1506. Gu Xingyin was actually more willing to stay in bed for the morning, but Sophia was not prepared to give her this chance. Deanna, my dear, this is our last semester in school. Don't waste the holidays. Sophia dug her out of the quilt. Gu Xingyin sat up on the bed in a daze. Her soft blonde hair was a little messy at this time, and her big blue eyes were blank. Her red lips were slightly pouted, and she looked very dazed. Sophia glanced at her, then looked at her again. She could not hold it in any longer, and leaned over to kiss her on the cheek. This time, Gu Xingyin's sleepiness flew away. However, she still didn't react. She stared blankly at Sophia. What are you doing? Sophia clutched her chest and looked at Gu Xingyin. She lamented. My dear Deanna, if I were a man, I would do my best to marry you. You are really too cute. Gu Xingyin burst out laughing. Then, under Sophia's urging, she tidied herself up, and the two of them left the school together. There was already a hovering car waiting outside. Gu Xingyin glanced at it. It was a little unfamiliar. It wasn't from Sophia's house at all. She stopped in her tracks with some doubts and saw a tall, black-haired man walk out. The first time he saw Gu Xingyin, a trace of surprise flashed in his eyes. But he quickly withdrew his gaze and revealed a gentle smile. Hello, Miss Leonard. I am Went Allen. As soon as he spoke, Gu Xingyin instantly knew who this man was. Earl Allen, who was a high genetic match with Sophia. Looking at them, it was obvious that they got along very well. She looked at Sophia with some ridicule. She didn't say anything, but Sophia couldn't help blushing. Fortunately, Sophia had always been a big-hearted person. She quickly adjusted her emotions and proudly showed off to Earl Allen. I'm not wrong, am I? Deanna is beautiful and sweet. Gu Xingyin couldn't help but facepalm when she heard this. Who would show off their friend's beauty in front of their boyfriend? Sophia was really magnanimous. She subconsciously glanced at Earl Allen. As expected, a look of helplessness flashed across his eyes when he heard Sophia's words. However, he did not look at Gu Xingyin. Instead, he focused on Sophia. Gu Xingyin could easily tell that this man had feelings for Sophia. Then she saw a smile on Earl Allen's face. He nodded and said, Yes. Miss Leonard is very beautiful and gentle. However, even though he was talking about Miss Leonard, his eyes were always on Sophia. Gu Xingyin. It was simply unbearable to watch. Could it be that Sophia had invited him here to watch their public display of affection? Didn't she know that she had experienced this kind of thing too many times? How could the boat of friendship capsize so easily? Although she was complaining, Gu Xingyin was still happy for Sophia. This Earl Allen seemed to be a very good man. Sophia dragged Gu Xingyin along as they shopped around the central area of the imperial capital. Both of them were not short of money, and whenever they saw something that they liked, they would lay their hands on it. Earl Allen, who had been following behind them, had a smile on his face as he played the role of a bag-carrying little brother. Until Sophia couldn't help but shout that she was tired. They all walked with their legs today. For a mermaid who had just reached adulthood and was not used to walking with her legs, walking and shopping was really not an easy task. Let's go over there and have a seat. Sophia pointed to a square next to her. Gu Xingyin, on the other hand, did not feel tired. She nodded. The three of them were about to walk to the square on the opposite side when a hover car suddenly stopped in front of them. Miss Leonard. A gentle voice came from the open window. Chapter 1507. The three of them were no strangers to the face that appeared in the car window. After all, Prince Jonathan was a figure who often appeared on the Empire's news. Sophia was stunned. How did His Highness Prince Jonathan know Diana? While she was still in a daze, Prince Jonathan had already gotten out of the car. He wore a baseball cap on his head and casual clothes on his body. He looked no different from the fashionable young people on the streets. It was obvious that he had put on a disguise to a certain extent. He couldn't tell at all that he was wearing a suit and looking elegant on TV. As a noble of the Empire, Earl Allen subconsciously wanted to salute Prince Jonathan the moment he saw him. But he was stopped by Jonathan. "I've spent a lot of effort to disguise myself. Don't expose me." Prince Jonathan's tone was full of amusement. The three of them became a four of them. To be honest, the three of them were naturally estranged from this prince who had suddenly joined. Jonathan had obviously noticed this as well. When he arrived at the square, he suddenly walked to Gu Xingyi's side and said, "Miss Leonard, do you mind talking to me alone?" Gu Xingyi smiled at him, and the two of them went to an open-air beverage shop not far away. Sophia heaved a sigh of relief when the two of them left. "Although His Highness Prince Jonathan looks very kind, I'm still a little nervous," she said. She found it a little strange. "I've never heard Diana mention that she knows Prince Jonathan." Duke Allen looked at the backs of the two of them thoughtfully. He reminded Sophia, "Didn't you say that Miss Leonard went for a genetic match not long ago?" Sophia nodded. "Yes, just a few days ago." "Wait." She widened her eyes and looked at Allen. "You mean?" Allen nodded. "It shouldn't be wrong." Sophia couldn't help but turn her head to look over and see that the two of them had already sat down. She was a little excited. "I really didn't expect Diana and His Highness Prince Jonathan. That's my Prince Charming." Sophia's tone was dreamy. Earl Allen. He felt helpless when it came to his future wife. However, Earl Allen looked at the two figures in the distance with some doubts in his heart. Unsurprisingly, the merfolk would know the result on the day of the genetic match. So Miss Leonard should have known the result of her match with His Highness Prince Jonathan long ago. However, she did not share it with Sophia. Normally, good sisters like them wouldn't hide any good news from each other. And if he wasn't mistaken, Miss Leonard didn't show much shyness or excitement when she saw Prince Jonathan. This was clearly abnormal, something that Allen could see. At this moment, Jonathan, who was sitting opposite Gu Xingyi, could naturally tell. This Miss Leonard did not seem to have any romantic feelings for him. For the first time, Jonathan doubted his own charm. He decided to get straight to the point. "Miss Leonard, you should already know about the genetic match, right?" Gu Xingyi nodded. Seeing that she was unwilling to say anything more, Jonathan could only continue to take the initiative. "Then I'd like to ask, what does Miss Leonard think of this?" Gu Xingyi thought to herself, "Are all the people of the Casso Empire so straightforward? Can she say I have no thoughts about you?" Chapter 1508. But with Prince Jonathan staring at her with such a burning gaze, Gu Xingyi obviously couldn't ignore it. So under Prince Jonathan's expectant gaze, Gu Xingyi shook her head innocently. Her big clear blue eyes blinked, and she replied very obediently, "I don't have any opinions." Jonathan. The little mermaid in front of him who had just reached adulthood didn't seem to be able to understand what it meant to be a partner. He looked at her innocent and pure face, and for a moment, he had the illusion that he was going to lead a child astray. Jonathan was even a little conflicted about whether he should tell her what such a high genetic compatibility meant. What was certain was that Miss Leonard didn't seem to be ready to be his partner. Jonathan was a little annoyed, but he was very satisfied with Gu Xingyi. Her family background, her appearance, and her temperament all made him very satisfied. Jonathan felt that he should make it clear to the person in front of him. She didn't have any romantic feelings for him yet, and that didn't matter. He could wait or take his time. More than 40 years had passed. Could it be that he was still in a hurry? But before he could speak, a low voice came from behind him. "Jonathan." Jonathan raised his head in surprise and looked at his friend standing behind him in disbelief. Redmond was still wearing his military uniform, and the cold aura around him didn't fit in with the casual atmosphere of this place. The point was that his face was so recognizable that someone seemed to have recognized him. Jonathan instantly forgot what he was going to say to Gu Xingyin, and he didn't have time to think about why Raymond was here. Seeing that someone had come over, he quickly got up and said to Gu Xingyin and Raymond, "Get out of here." Gu Xingyin almost instantly understood what he meant. She looked at Raymond helplessly and said, "Marshal, it seems that you don't know the appeal of your face in the Empire." While they were talking, someone had already approached, and they could faintly hear the screams of mermaids. Jonathan took a step forward, then looked back at the two people who hadn't moved yet and shouted, "Don't just stand there, let's go. My hover car is over there." Gu Xingyin subconsciously walked forward, but her hand was caught by a warm palm, and then a force was applied. She felt her body float up, and when she came back to her senses, she was lying on Raymond's back. Raymond didn't look back. "You mermaids are too weak, I'll carry you faster." Gu Xingyin felt his chest vibrate slightly when he spoke, and couldn't help laughing. This man was really a man of action. Raymond's stamina was indeed excellent. In less than 2 minutes, he had caught up with Jonathan in front of him. Jonathan turned his head to look at Gu Xingyin, who was being carried on Raymond's back, and a strange feeling flashed through his heart. But he didn't have time to think about it. The three of them ran to the hover car, and Jonathan pressed the control button, finally shaking off the people behind them. No one noticed that there was a mermaid where Jonathan and Gu Xingyin were sitting and chatting. She had been silent before, and now she was angrily looking at their backs. Chapter 1509. Jonathan let out a sigh of relief and complained, "Raymond, next time you come out, at least put on a disguise." Redmond frowned when he heard Jonathan's words. Clearly, he didn't understand. He said, "Actually, I don't know why we ran, Jonathan." If Jonathan hadn't yelled at him to leave, he wouldn't have had to do this. He knew that it was because the people were very enthusiastic, but everyone respected each other. As long as he showed that he didn't want to be disturbed, they would leave quietly. It wasn't the first time he encountered this kind of thing. Hearing Raymond's words, Jonathan helplessly put his hand on his forehead. He could roughly guess that those fanatical people didn't do it because they understood. It was because of Raymond's terrifying aura that they didn't dare to get close. Now that it was quiet, he asked, "Raymond, why are you here?" This was the central business district of the capital. Based on his understanding of Raymond, he shouldn't like this kind of place. Raymond lowered his eyes. In fact, he didn't know why he put down the things in his hands and ran over when he heard that Jonathan and Deanna were meeting. Maybe he was a little panicked. Deanna knew that he had a high genetic compatibility with Jonathan, and he also knew what kind of mermaid Jonathan liked. So he was afraid that Deanna would agree to something with Jonathan. He said faintly, "Nothing. I just wanted to buy some things." His attitude was a little cold, but Jonathan didn't care at all. He had known Raymond's bad temper for a long time. After that, Raymond sat quietly and listened to Jonathan and Gu Xingyin, who was sitting next to him, chatting. Most of the time, it was Jonathan who started the conversation, and Gu Xingyin would answer him when he smelled something. This allowed his heart, which was in his throat, to settle down. It seemed that they were still strangers. Raymond made up his mind. He would wait for the results of the genetic compatibility tomorrow. If he and Deanna were very compatible, then it would be for the best. If their genetic compatibility wasn't as good as Jonathan's, Redmond hid the anger in his eyes. "Then I'm sorry, Jonathan." Redmond was as stubborn and domineering as his appearance. Whatever he wanted, no matter if it was a mortal or an object, he would never allow it to belong to anyone else. Gu Xingyin sent a message to Sophia to explain her current situation, and did not say anything else. Jonathan was a little annoyed. The perfect date he had in mind was not like this at all. However, Redmond remained in his hover car, and had no intention of getting down. Gu Xingyin was the first to say goodbye. "It's still early. We can have dinner together." Jonathan urged him to stay. Gu Xingyin shook her head. "My friend Sophia has returned to school. I promised to go with her." Jonathan had no choice but to send Gu Xingyin back to school. When she got out of the car, Gu Xingyin felt her ears heat up. When Raymond bent down to open the car door, he whispered goodbye into her ear. Sophia was waiting for her at the school gate, and Earl Allen was standing beside her. Deanna. Sophia finally heaved a sigh of relief when she saw Gu Xingyin. Chapter 15:10. Gu Xingyin said goodbye to Jonathan, and the two of them said goodbye to Earl Allen, who had been waiting here, before walking into the school. As soon as they entered the school, Sophia smiled mysteriously at Gu Xingyin. Tell me honestly, Deanna, what is your genetic compatibility with His Highness Prince Jonathan? Gu Xingyin replied, 93%. My God! Sophia exclaimed. She looked at Gu Xingyin, her eyes full of smiles. My dear Deanna will soon become the prince's wife. Gu Xingyin looked at her helplessly. Don't talk nonsense. Sophia only thought she was shy. But Gu Xingyin knew that she couldn't marry Prince Jonathan. Raymond couldn't watch her marry Jonathan without doing anything. She had the confidence. The two of them walked towards the dormitory laughing. At the same time, in another dormitory in the mermaid school, a gloomy Audrey opened a communication channel. I want to know who the mermaid Deanna Leonard's genes are most compatible with. This was originally a secret, but the House of Menlo happened to have a clansman working at the genetic matching center, so Audrey knew something that others didn't. She cut off the communication and sat on the bed with some irritation. Today, she was going to take advantage of her rest time to go out and buy some beautiful clothes in preparation for meeting Prince Jonathan in the future. Although Prince Jonathan didn't contact the House of Menlo 2 months after the match results came out, Audrey had always been very confident in herself. She felt that she would become the prince's wife sooner or later. Until today. She sat on the other side of the bench, watching Prince Jonathan talk very attentively to the most annoying Deanna. Seeing him being very gentle with Deanna, and listening to the conversation between them, Audrey felt a great crisis. Listening to Prince Jonathan's tone, Deanna's genetic compatibility might be higher than her own? How could it be? Audrey didn't want to believe it. She was no longer in the mood to buy things. She hurried back and contacted the person in the family to find out what was going on. The results came out quickly. Audrey looked at the bright red 93% on the communication channel, and her heart was filled with hatred. It was Deanna again. It was one thing for her to steal his limelight in school, yet he wanted to snatch away the person he liked. Why was she so annoying? Audrey sat alone in the room for a long time. She made a decision. If only Deanna wasn't here anymore, she would be the most outstanding one among this batch of mermaids, and the one with the highest degree of compatibility with His Highness Prince Jonathan in the entire empire. Gu Xingyin received a system notification, saying that the target's aggro had reached an extremely high level. She knew that this was the beginning of the plot. Soon, Audrey would come to ask him outright. Gu Xingyin guessed that Audrey would soon start, but he didn't expect her to be so unbearable. The next day, Audrey came to Gu Xingyin in private. She said that she was about to graduate, and there was no barrier between her classmates. She wanted to clear up all the misunderstandings with Gu Xingyin before that. Of course, Gu Xingyin was very cooperative. In fact, Gu Xingyin really didn't know what Audrey was thinking. The mermaid school was very strict. She came to her so openly and asked to go out with her. If something happened to her at that time, how could she escape responsibility? Chapter 15:11. It was probably because the merfolk in this world were too well protected. They didn't even have much experience in doing bad things. And Audrey wanted Deanna's life because of a moment of impulse. But no matter what the reason was, she did make a move on Deanna, and caused irreparable consequences. This alone was a sin that couldn't be offset in any way. At noon the next day, in the office of the Imperial Legion's Commander-in-Chief, the communicator that Raymond had been waiting for all day finally rang. For the first time in his life, Raymond felt a trace of nervousness. He picked up the call. Hello. After classes the next day, Gu Xingyin finished his dinner and went for a walk before arriving at a very secluded man-made lake in the school. This was the place where Audrey asked her out. Of course, Audrey actually wanted to ask Gu Xingyin out, but the school was too strict. Unless there was a very urgent matter, the students were not allowed to go out outside the holidays. This was also for the safety of the merfolk. Although the imperial capital was relatively safe, It was still very dangerous for a merfolk to go out at night. Gu Xingyin walked to the destination. There was a small stone pavilion here. Sitting in the stone pavilion, she could clearly see the reflection of the moon on the clear surface. Next to it was a very lush bamboo forest. The street lamps were a little farther away, so this corner was a little dim. When Gu Xingyin walked into the pavilion, she found that this was a surveillance blind spot. It seemed that Audrey still had some brains. Why did you choose this place, Audrey? Audrey came early and was sitting in the stone pavilion. Gu Xingyin went to sit opposite her. Audrey seemed to smile and said, "Because there's no one here." Seeing that the person opposite her was a little confused, Audrey took a deep breath. No one knew that her left hand hidden under the table was holding a laser beam gun that could easily penetrate the stone table. The palm of her left hand was already soaked with her own sweat. Today's decision was indeed very bold for Audrey. He looked at Deanna. The lights were dim, so even though they were very close to each other, she could not see Deanna as clearly as she did during the day. But even in this situation, Deanna was still a beauty who could easily attract one's attention. Thinking of how Prince Jonathan and Deanna were chatting happily during the day, Audrey instantly felt the anger in her heart rise again. She could not help but raise her voice. "Deanna, let me ask you a question. I hope you can answer me seriously." Gu Xingyin couldn't help but frown. "Audrey, with your attitude, are you really here to reconcile with me?" Audrey's face turned cold. The reconciliation was just an excuse she had casually made up. She would hate Deanna for the rest of her life. Who would want to reconcile with her? She stared at Gu Xingyin and asked, "Your genetic match target is Prince Jonathan, isn't it?" Gu Xingyin looked shocked, as if he was very surprised that she knew. Seeing her expression, Audrey still felt a little angry even though she knew about it first. She gritted her teeth and said, "Deanna, promise me that you will refuse to be with Prince Jonathan." Chapter 15:12. Gu Xingyin frowned when she heard this. To be honest, even if she didn't have any good feelings for Prince Jonathan, she would still be very unhappy to hear Audrey's words. It should be said that no one would be happy to hear such rude words. Her face also relaxed and she said to Audrey, "Audrey, do you know what you're talking about? What right do you have to interfere with my decision?" Audrey was a little emotional. Without saying a word, she took out the laser beam gun hidden under the table and pointed it straight at Gu Xingyin. "Do you agree? If you don't agree, I don't mind fighting you to the death." At such a distance, even if Audrey didn't aim, it would be difficult for Deanna to dodge with the lethality of the laser beam gun. Of course Deanna couldn't dodge, but Gu Xingyin might not be able to. Gu Xingyin obediently put her hands on top of her head. She seemed to be a little flustered. She looked at Audrey and said, "Audrey, what are you doing? Do you know that this is illegal?" Audrey saw her scared look, and her heart was suddenly filled with a strange sense of existence. She didn't know what was wrong with her. She felt like she was being controlled by a demon called impulse. She just wanted to follow her heart and make the person in front of her disappear completely from the world. "Illegal?" Audrey laughed. "As long as I don't say it, you can't say it. Who will know what I did?" Her face quickly became cold again, and she pointed the gun at Gu Xingyin. "You say, do you agree? As long as you promise to refuse Prince Jonathan, I will consider letting you go." Gu Xingyin said calmly, "You know, this is not something I can decide alone." Genetic compatibility was an authority. Usually most of the marriages in the Casso Empire followed this match, because this way, healthier offspring could be born. Audrey was not moved by her words at all. "No, Deanna, you can refuse. As long as the mermaid doesn't agree, even His Highness can't force you." Gu Xingyin's eyes became cold because of her words. She knew what Audrey meant by that. Yes, the Empire was very tolerant of mermaids. Even if the genetic pairing was successful, as long as the mermaid was unwilling, no one could force them to marry. But for such a willful mermaid, basically, no noble with status would marry her. Moreover, her DNA sample would be destroyed by the genetic matching center. In other words, as long as Gu Xingyin dared to do this, her life would basically be ruined. She could either stay single for the rest of her life or marry a poor commoner. Only Audrey dared to say that. Gu Xingyin was about to say something to stall for time, but her gaze suddenly froze. She said calmly, "Audrey, I think you need to calm down. Think about it. If you shoot me, what will happen to you? Everyone knows that you asked me to meet you during the day." Audrey's hand trembled and Gu Xingyin shut her mouth. Audrey sneered, "Don't stall for time, I know." At this moment, a ray of light came from not far away. Someone was coming. Audrey's expression changed greatly, and she looked at Gu Xingyin. "You notified someone else?" Gu Xingyin spread her hands innocently. "I told Sophia that I would meet you tonight. She might be worried about me." It was not just Sophia who came. Audrey even saw the school's patrol team. They were the elite troops sent by the military to protect the safety of the students. Chapter 15-13. Audrey's heart was filled with despair. She knew that she had been exposed. The people on the other side seemed to have realized that something was wrong. They quickly rushed over. Audrey raised her head and saw Gu Xingyin's half-smile. She didn't know what provoked her, but she gritted her teeth and said, "Since you've been exposed, Deanna, you can go die." The laser beam in her hand shone brightly and enveloped Gu Xingyin. The patrol team that was rushing over was shocked when they saw the beam of light. Pa! The gun in Audrey's hand fell to the ground. She was quickly subdued. Audrey didn't even resist. Instead, she laughed hysterically. "Ha ha ha ha, Deanna, you're still going to die, ha ha." Sophia ran over at this moment. This was the first sentence she heard. She didn't even think about it. She raised her hand and slapped Audrey's face. The patrol team didn't stop her. Sophia's hand was shaking. She looked at the figure lying on the ground and didn't dare to walk over. Could it be, the innocent and pure Deanna was really? Cough, cough, cough. "Sophia, are you here? Come and help me up. I think I sprained my ankle." A cry of pain came from the ground. Sophia was stunned. She quickly squatted down and saw Gu Xingyin sitting up on her own. She was surprised and happy. She asked uncertainly, "Deanna, are you okay?" Gu Xingyin smiled and said, "Maybe I'm lucky? Just now my foot slipped and I fell down just in time to avoid her laser beam." Before she finished speaking, she was hugged by the excited Sophia. "That's great." Gu Xingyin. "Dear, can you let me get up first?" Audrey was dazed when she heard Gu Xingyin's voice. She was on the verge of breaking down and shouted, "Deanna, how can you be okay?" Miss Monroe." The patrolling soldier standing next to her said coldly, "Please save some energy to think about how to lighten your charges when the time comes." In the eyes of these soldiers, mermaids were delicate and weak, and needed to be taken care of gently. But right under their noses, a mermaid was almost murdered. This kind of thing was simply intolerable. Even if the one who did it was a mermaid, he still couldn't tolerate it. Audrey was taken away. As for Gu Xingyin, she was escorted back to her dorm by Sophia and the patrol team. After such a thing happened, the school didn't hide it. Instead, they informed the Leonard family at that time. Things were getting out of hand. The three masters of the Leonard family had all arrived at the school. They were relieved to see that Gu Xingyin was fine. They requested to bring Gu Xingyin home to recuperate. Gu Xingyin's elder brother directly questioned the school's protection of the students. He heard that if it wasn't for Deanna's fall, she might have. They didn't even dare to think about the consequences. The school was in the wrong. After hearing their request and consulting Gu Xingyin's opinion, the Leonard family brought her home overnight. Almost at the same time, Raymond, who was ready to rest at home, also received the news. "What did you say?" The man's aura suddenly froze. 10 chapters, please subscribe. Chapter 15-14. The subordinate on the other side was a little nervous. After explaining the matter clearly in a few words, he saw the marshal's gloomy face that was almost murderous. He was inexplicably nervous. Fortunately, Raymond did not mean to embarrass the innocent. After the report was over, he cut off the communication. He was no longer sleepy at once. God knew how much he wanted to go to the Leonard family to see if she was all right. But in what name? Something had just happened, and he already knew about it. Wasn't it obvious that he was looking for someone to monitor her? Raymond could only endure it. For the first time, He regretted asking the genetic matching center to conceal the degree of genetic compatibility between the two. At that time, he thought that he would find time to tell her in person and give her a surprise. Unexpectedly, there was no reason to visit her now. After thinking about it, he sent a message to the genetic matching center overnight. Enduring it tonight was already the limit. No matter what, he had to go to the Leonard family tomorrow. At the same time, Gu Xingyin, who had returned home, was carefully asked several times by her family. After confirming that it was only a slight sprain on her right foot, they were relieved. Her mother, Cassie, frowned. She was originally very satisfied with Prince Jonathan. But now, although she knew in her heart that this matter had nothing to do with Prince Jonathan, after all, her daughter was injured because of him. She couldn't help but have some knots in her heart. Gu Xingyin helplessly watched her parents and elder brother circling around her. They didn't listen to her when she told them to rest. In the end, she could only say that she was tired and wanted to sleep. The three of them hurriedly told her to have a good rest before retreating. However, after the three masters of the Leonard family walked out of the room, they did not go to sleep. Instead, they discussed the matter in the living room. This matter can't be let go just like this. Who wants to harm our Diana? So what if they are from the Menlo family? Gu Xingyin's eldest brother, Burton, put away the smile on his face and said in a deep voice. Cassie, who had always been gentle, also had a cold face. Yes, as long as I think that my Diana was almost harmed, I can't help but feel scared. As she said this, the tears that she had been holding back in her daughter's room fell. Anderson comforted his wife and said, Don't worry, tomorrow I will go to the Mermaid Rights Association to submit an application. This time, no one will be let off lightly. However, this family of three didn't know that they had already made plans ahead of them. The next day, an even bigger surprise awaited them. What did you say? Anderson yelled out. He was exercising on the lawn at home when he received a message from the genetic matching center. The content of the message made him stand there in a daze. Anderson was still in disbelief when he cut off the communication. He couldn't care less about training, and hurriedly walked over to his wife who was watering the flowers. Casey. Casey straightened up and was somewhat dissatisfied. Where's your aristocratic demeanor, Anderson? Anderson ignored his wife's words and said absent-mindedly, I just received news from the genetic matching center that our Deanna's genetic compatibility with Marshall Raymond is 98%. Casey thought he had misheard. Who did you say? Chapter 15:15. Anderson was still a bit agitated. He repeated, It's Marshall Cager Raymond. Casey's hands went soft. She tried to stabilize her hands. She put the shower head on the ground and didn't let it fall. She said in disbelief, I remember Marshall Raymond was against genetic matching? Marshall Cager Raymond never went to the genetic matching center to provide a sample. He didn't like genetic matching. This was something the whole empire knew. Anderson also couldn't understand. He said, I don't know when Marshall Raymond went to provide the sample, but this is the news from the genetic matching center. It shouldn't be wrong. Casey was still a bit stunned. 98%. This was a number that had never been achieved since the establishment of the genetic matching center. What did 98% mean? The genes of the two almost reached a perfect match. It was like their genes were specially made for each other. And the offspring of these two people would completely inherit all the excellent genes of their parents, and perhaps even reach a higher level. This was something that was almost impossible to happen, but it happened just like that. Anderson and Casey were both surprised and happy at the same time. At this time, the housekeeper suddenly sent a message. Sir, madam, Marshall Raymond came to visit. The housekeeper's voice was calm and elegant as always. This was the most basic quality of a qualified housekeeper. But if you listened carefully, you would be able to hear a very well-hidden trace of excitement in the housekeeper's voice. Raymond's title of the empire's male god wasn't for nothing. Any man would have a dream about the army when they were young. Many people realized it, but even more people, due to various reasons, could only stay in the dream stage. And Raymond was the person who perfectly interpreted their dreams. Anderson and Casey looked at each other. They understood that Marshall Raymond probably knew the result of the genetic matching. They just didn't know what the other party's purpose was. After all, Raymond didn't like genetic matching. This was something the whole empire knew. No matter what, the first thing they did was to welcome Raymond at the entrance. When the two walked to the gate, their eldest son Burton was already standing there, and excitedly chatting with Raymond. Anderson took the lead and stepped forward. "Marshall Raymond, welcome to the Leonard family." Raymond nodded at Anderson. "Hello, Patriarch Leonard." He looked at Cassie. "Mrs. Leonard." Cassie smiled nervously. Gu Xingyin had slept a little late last night, so she only got up at this time. The moment she woke up, she heard a message from the system. "Raymond is here? So soon?" Gu Xingyin checked the time. At 8 o'clock he was indeed a little anxious. The system said, "The first thing is that you're injured. It's not easy for him to wait until this morning to come over. The second thing is that the results of your DNA match are out." Gu Xingyin was curious. How many? She estimated in her heart that she should be slightly higher than Jonathan. However, no matter how high she calculated, the result given by the system still surprised her. 98%. Gu Xingyin's eyes widened in surprise. This will probably become a piece of news that will shock the entire empire, right? Chapter 15-16. Gu Xingyin was right. Not to mention that this could be called a perfect genetic match. Just the identity of one of the protagonists was enough to make this matter a hot topic throughout the empire. At this moment, Gu Xingyin's communicator rang. Casey's gentle voice came through. "Deanna, are you up? If you are, come to the living room. There are guests at home." Gu Xingyin replied, and quickly chose clothes with the help of the robot. After tidying up, she went downstairs. Then she saw Raymond, who was talking happily with her father and brother. Gu Xingyin raised her eyebrows in surprise. She was a little surprised that Raymond was able to chat with them. After all, she thought that what she would see when she went downstairs would be a few people facing each other awkwardly. Seeing her coming over, Anderson said with a smile, "Deanna, this is Marshall Raymond. I don't need to introduce you, right?" He then turned to Raymond and said, "This is my youngest daughter, Deanna." Gu Xingyin stood aside obediently and smiled at Redmond. "Hello, Marshall Redmond." Raymond suddenly stood up and walked to her side. The Leonard family was a little surprised by his action. Raymond reached out a hand to Gu Xingyin. "Hello, Miss Leonard." Gu Xingyin blinked, looked at him for a second, and then hesitantly reached out her hand. So small, so soft, so comfortable. This was what Raymond felt in his heart. But on the surface, he just calmly shook Gu Xingyin's hand and calmly let go. "Nice to meet you." It turned out to be just a greeting. Anderson and the others were relieved. Seeing that Deanna didn't seem to be afraid of him, Raymond breathed a sigh of relief in his heart. He had tried his best to soften his aura, for fear of scaring this petite little mermaid. Seeing that his daughter and Marshall Raymond were getting along rather well, Casey let out a sigh of relief. Marshall Raymond was not young anymore. Based on the genetic compatibility between him and Deanna, it was almost impossible for the two of them not to become partners. She was afraid that even though Marshall Redmond was a perfect Marshall, he wouldn't be a good husband. Compared to an iceberg like Marshall Raymond, she suddenly felt that Prince Jonathan's gentle temperament wasn't that bad after all. They chatted for a while, and Raymond suddenly said, "Miss Leonard hasn't had breakfast yet?" He frowned slightly when he said this. He seemed a little dissatisfied. Gu Xingyin thought, "I just woke up and heard that you came. How could I have time to eat?" Casey looked at Raymond, with some doubts in her heart. She didn't understand what Marshall Raymond meant. Was just a simple question, or he didn't like Deanna's lifestyle. If it was the latter, she would start to worry again. Before she could guess, Raymond spoke. He looked at Gu Xingyin and said, "The mermaid's stomach has always been delicate. It's better for Miss Leonard to eat something first. We can talk about other things later." This was exactly what Casey wanted. She was afraid of being rude in front of the guests, so she asked Deanna to come down quickly. He didn't expect Marshall Raymond to be so attentive despite his cold appearance. Casey thought with satisfaction. Chapter 15-17. Hence, Gu Xingyin obediently walked into the dining room alone. When she came out after breakfast, she found that Raymond was the only one left in the living room. He was sitting in the living room and stood up when he saw her come out. Obviously, he was waiting for her. "Miss Leonard, have you had breakfast?" Raymond asked. Gu Xingyin nodded. Raymond nodded and said, "Then let's take a walk in the garden. It just so happens that I have something to discuss with Miss Leonard." Gu Xingyin said no problem, and the two of them walked out one after the other. Raymond walked in front, and Gu Xingyin followed. After walking for a while, Raymond suddenly stopped in his tracks. Gu Xingyin also stopped. There was a trace of helplessness in Raymond's voice. "Am I walking too fast, Miss Leonard?" Gu Xingyin shook her head. She could see that Raymond had slowed down as much as possible to accommodate her. Raymond turned around and looked at her. "Then why is Miss Leonard always behind me? I can't walk and talk to you at the same time." Gu Xingyin blushed and walked up quickly. Finally, she was side by side with Raymond. Redmond was finally satisfied with his answer. The two walked side by side for a while before Raymond suddenly said, "Miss Leonard, you can probably guess why I'm here today, right?" Gu Xingyin looked at him blankly. The system watching from the side. The host's acting skills are amazing. Looking at her, Raymond couldn't tell if she really didn't know or if she was avoiding it. But it didn't matter if she was avoiding it. He was best at getting straight to the point. "I received news from the genetic matching center yesterday. My genetic match with Miss Leonard is 98%. Raymond stared at Gu Xingyin, not letting go of any of her reactions. Today, the little mermaid was wearing a yellow dress. The fresh color made her skin look extra fair and tender. This little mermaid didn't look like she was 18 years old at all. Hearing her own words, her eyes suddenly widened, as if she was at a loss. However, her big blue eyes met Raymond's. As though she had been scalded, she lowered her eyes. 98% so? This reaction obviously pleased Raymond. A hint of a smile flashed across his eyes, but unfortunately Gu Xingyin, who had her head lowered, did not notice it. "So, Miss Leonard, are you willing to become the future mistress of the Raymond family?" Raymond asked in a serious tone. Gu Xingyin raised her head. Her eyes were filled with panic and her face was flushed red. Obviously, she didn't expect Redmond to say it out loud. In Redmond's eyes, her current appearance was exceptionally delicious. She really wanted to take a bite. Marshal Redmond thought to himself with an expressionless face. I have to ask my family's opinion." Raymond's tone was natural. "I've already talked to Master Leonard and Mrs. Casey. They are very much in favor of our marriage." Clearly, Anderson and the others said that they would listen to Deanna's wishes, but Raymond had automatically replaced it with their tacit consent. When the little mermaid heard this, she seemed to be burning up. She lowered her head and refused to speak with a red face. Raymond appreciated her shy appearance and said seriously, "If you don't speak, I'll take it that you agree." Chapter 15-18. Gu Xingyin never thought that this man would be so domineering. However, Deanna was naive and didn't know how to refute such words. The consequence of not knowing how to refute was that just like what Redmond had said, the matter was settled. Raymond even went a step further and said, "Then I'll call you Deanna from now on?" Gu Xingyin still lowered her head, indicating that she didn't want to talk to him. Raymond knew that she was shy and didn't care. He said, "I'll announce our marriage in advance. Don't worry, I'll give you a grand wedding." Therefore, when the three masters of the Leonard family saw the two of them again, Marshal Raymond still had a calm expression on his face, but their Deanna was following behind him with a flushed face. They were all experienced people. Seeing this, what else could they not understand? Seeing her daughter like this, Mrs. Casey was happy and melancholy. After Raymond sent Gu Xingyin back to the hall, he said goodbye. When he left, he glanced sideways at Gu Xingyin and said, "Then I'll go first, Deanna." Gu Xingyin finally looked up at him and said, "Goodbye, Marshal Raymond." Raymond raised his eyebrows when he heard this, but he didn't leave. Instead, he stared at her. This gaze made Gu Xingyin blush again. Seeing the confused look on the little mermaid's face, Raymond sighed softly. I called you the wrong name." Gu Xingyin was a little confused. Marshal Raymond. When Gu Xingyin saw Redmond's gaze, she suddenly had an epiphany. Facing Redmond's burning gaze, she stammered, "Goodbye, Cargill." Only then was Raymond satisfied. The corner of his lips curled up and said, "That's it, Deanna, call me Cager." "Raymond, that's an outsider's name. You have to call me Cager." Not far away, seeing the two getting along, the Leonard family finally breathed a sigh of relief. From the looks of it, Marshal Raymond seemed to be very fond of Deanna. This way they could rest assured. Raymond's actions were very fast. The next day he announced the news after returning to the family. Hearing that he was willing to get married, Mrs. Raymond was so happy that she was about to cry. God knows how long she had been looking forward to this day. The next day, Raymond announced the good news to the entire empire through the Star Web media. Marshal Raymond was getting married. This news quickly occupied the headlines of various media. Even the news of the birth of the first generation of the royal family was suppressed. The fanatical admirers looked up the information of the bride. Leonard family's young lady? Well, her family background. Can't find her photo? How can the Leonards family protect her so well? Her genetic compatibility with Sir Marshal? When they saw the number below, they were dumbfounded. Many people rubbed their eyes and took a closer look. Finally, they were certain that they were not mistaken. 98%. God. This is simply a miracle. Raymond's voice sounded very happy, and the Raymond family was also very happy. No one came out to slander him. Of course, there were occasionally one or two people who wanted to cause trouble, but they were refuted by Raymond's fanatical admirers. The Marshal had been single for so many years, and he was finally planning to get married. And the bride's genetic compatibility was so high. It was fine if they didn't wish them well, but there were actually people who didn't have eyes and wanted to stir up trouble? Absolutely intolerable. Chapter 1519. All in all, in the entire Casso Empire, blessings for the Marshal occupied almost the entire mainstream. But there were also some people who were unhappy. For example, Prince Jonathan. He had also received the news from the Genetic Matching Center the day before. After all, this was also related to him. Jonathan was stunned at the time. He didn't expect the bride to be in his heart to have such a high genetic match with his good friend. He hadn't figured out what to do yet when he saw Raymond's high-profile declaration today. He said he would marry the young lady of the Leonard family. What about him? A feeling of being betrayed by his good friend suddenly rose in Jonathan's heart. He turned on the video call almost without thinking. Redmond's figure soon appeared in front of Jonathan. Jonathan looked at him angrily. "Raymond, your behavior today, is it worthy of our friendship?" Redmond looked at Jonathan quietly until Jonathan felt a little uncomfortable. Raymond finally opened his mouth. "Jonathan, you should know whether or not I've done anything wrong to you. Deanna doesn't belong to you. She belongs to me." Jonathan's face turned cold. "But you clearly know that I like her." Raymond's voice also turned cold. "But she doesn't like you." And Jonathan, don't tell me you don't know how high the genetic match between Deanna and me is? Even from the perspective of the Empire's laws, Deanna belongs to me. You have nothing to do with her, and you have no right to question me. Jonathan stood up dejectedly. In fact, Raymond was right. He had no right to question anything. Raymond had a higher genetic match with her. He also didn't have any agreement with the Leonard family. At this moment, he was already regretting it. He regretted that he didn't go to the Leonard family immediately and settle the matter with Deanna when he knew the result. If he and Deanna had any status, then no matter who it was, even if they had a 100% genetic match with Deanna, they wouldn't be able to take Deanna away from him. But there were no regrets and no ifs. He didn't seize the opportunity, so in this game that wasn't a game, he lost completely. There was another person who was shocked. It was Audrey, who was in the mermaid prison. Her crime had not yet been decided, and because of her mermaid identity, she was only temporarily detained in the mermaid prison. Other than the lack of freedom, her days were not too difficult. While she was sitting in the room in a daze, she happened to overhear the conversation between two Imperial police officers. The topic of their conversation was about Raymond's wedding. Marshal Raymond? Audrey naturally knew this. When she was young, she also admired heroes like Marshall Raymond. However, when she grew up, she no longer liked those cold people. Instead, she pursued men like Prince Jonathan, who was as warm as the sun. Marshall Raymond's fiancée is also from a good family. She's actually the daughter of the Leonard family. The Leonard family? Audrey suddenly opened her eyes wide. As far as she knew, Deanna Leonard was the only daughter of the Leonard family that could be considered rich in the capital. Didn't Deanna have a 93% genetic compatibility with Prince Jonathan? She opened the door, and the sudden commotion startled the two people outside. Chapter 15:20. When the two men saw that she was fine, the expressions on their faces became a little impatient. Audrey has always been arrogant and bad-tempered, and she didn't restrain herself much here. Instead, she became even more aggressive. If it was someone else, these two men would have already taught them how to be obedient. But this is a precious mermaid. Her crime hasn't been determined yet, so they didn't dare to do anything. But not doing anything doesn't conflict with hating this bad-tempered mermaid. So when they saw Audrey, they didn't have a good expression on their faces. Audrey wasn't in the mood to argue with them, but asked anxiously, "Who is the mermaid that Marshall Raymond is about to marry?" The two men looked at her anxious appearance and suddenly remembered that this mermaid was sent here because she wanted to kill her classmate. And her classmate, they heard that it was the young lady of the Leonard family. Thinking about it this way, if she was sent to prison, the rest of her life would be ruined. But that Miss Leonard was about to become the wife of the Marshal of the Empire. The two men suddenly showed a smile on their faces. They have long been displeased with Audrey, but they have never had a way to deal with her. This time, there was a way to provoke her. One of them said, "You're asking about Marshall Raymond's fiancée? Of course, it's the young lady of the Leonard family, the richest family in the imperial capital." When he said this, he had a proud look on his face, as if he had something to do with this matter. Audrey's face turned pale. Deanna Leonard? In fact, how could the newspaper write Deanna's name? But the two men still nodded. Audrey murmured with a pale face, "How is that possible? How could she be marrying Marshall Raymond? It shouldn't be like this." Listening to this woman's strange chatter, the man who spoke earlier frowned and said, "What do you mean by this? His Excellency Marshall and his fiancée have a genetic match of 98%. They are a match made in heaven. If she doesn't marry Marshall Raymond, do you think you can? Why don't you take a mirror and look at yourself? Do you think you deserve it?" He obviously misunderstood Audrey, thinking that she had some ulterior motives for Marshall Raymond. When Audrey heard the 98%, her legs went soft and she sat straight on the ground. She covered her face with her hands and laughed softly. After laughing for a while, large drops of tears fell from her fingers. The two men looked at him, and one of them said hesitantly, "Could it be that this person has gone crazy from the shock?" Another person said coldly, "That has nothing to do with us. We're just sharing a piece of good news for her to hear." The person who spoke earlier felt that it was right. The two of them sat up and ignored Audrey, who was still crying on the ground. Audrey had never regretted anything as much as she did now. When she first came here, she didn't regret it. She didn't feel that she had done anything wrong. She was working hard for her own happiness. But now, the truth told her that what she had done was simply a joke. Deanna would never have married Prince Jonathan. She didn't block his way at all. Then why did he do it? Because of a guess, because of a misunderstanding. He sent himself to this chaotic and terrible prison. She regretted it. Chapter 15:21. But no matter how much she regretted it, it was useless. The people who knew that she was regretting it were unrelated to her. The people she should be repentant for might never see her again in this life. Gu Xingyin was very busy. After Raymond announced the news, she, the future marshal's wife, was bombarded by countless people. Her classmates who had a good relationship with her, as well as the relatives of the Leonard family, all sent messages to express their blessings. The most excited person was Sophia. She was not satisfied with the messages, so she personally went to the Leonard family during the holidays at the end of the month. The two of them had a good relationship. Sophia had been to the Leonard family's house before, so she was not unfamiliar with this place. When Sophia saw Gu Xingyin, she gave her a hug. Gu Xingyin had been staying at home because of what happened last time. The two of them had not seen each other for almost 2 weeks. Sophia sighed. I thought you would become the princess, but I didn't expect you to become the marshal's wife. In terms of nobility, the title of princess sounded more impressive than the marshal's wife. But the title of prince only sounded better. In terms of power, it could not compare to the marshal who controlled the 10 major armies of the Casso Empire. Even the emperor of the Casso Empire had to be courteous when he saw Redmond, let alone the prince. Sophia was still a bit worried. She clearly remembered that the last time she had invited Diana out to play, they had met Prince Jonathan. Looking at Prince Jonathan, it was clear that he liked Diana. Then, would he be willing to accept this? After all, he was the prince. If he wanted to cause trouble, the Leonard family would not have it easy. She expressed her worries. Gu Xingyin smiled and comforted her. Don't worry. His Highness isn't a petty person. Even if there is something, Kager will take care of it. Kager? Sophia laughed when she heard this. She looked at Gu Xingyin and teased. How long has it been since you guys spread the news? How did it become Kager so quickly? Gu Xingyin blushed and turned away without saying anything. Sophia was left laughing silently at the side. At the same time, in the Raymond family, Lady Raymond was a very beautiful lady. Raymond's father, Raymond Sr., died early. Such a big family was forcibly propped up by such a weak mermaid. Raymond had always respected his mother. Apart from marriage, he had never disobeyed her on anything else. And now Mrs. Raymond's wish was about to come true. She looked at her son in a very good mood. Kager, you've seen that young lady from the Leonard family, right? What do you think? Raymond looked at his mother, thought for a moment, and said, very good. If it was someone else, Mrs. Raymond would definitely feel that they were being perfunctory. However, she knew her son's character well. The fact that he could say those 2 words meant that he liked Miss Leonard very much. This made Mrs. Raymond even more curious about the daughter-in-law she had never met before. She wondered what a mermaid that Kager liked would be like. Raymond naturally saw through his mother's thoughts. He hesitated for a moment, and even put in a good word for Gu Xingyin in front of his mother. Diana is very good. You will definitely like her when you see her. Chapter 1522. Oh my, he's already calling her Diana. Mrs. Raymond thought to herself that this was incredible. Looking at Raymond's appearance, it was clear that he was deeply in love with her. She was very happy in this life. When her husband was here, he was very obedient to her. After her husband left, her son also worked hard and won great glory for her. It could be said that she had no regrets in this life. She kept urging Raymond to get married in the hope that he could quickly find a partner who could accompany him for the rest of his life. Mrs. Raymond wanted her son to be happy, so when Raymond refused the genetic match again and again, she didn't force him. If the partner he found wasn't someone he liked, how could Raymond be happy? But it was good now. Looking at Raymond's appearance, he should be very fond of the young lady from the Leonard family. When you have time, bring her over for mother to see. Mrs. Raymond said. Mrs. Raymond nodded. Okay. Gu Xingyin was brought out by Sophia. Sophia was a lively, extroverted, and active person. After hearing that Gu Xingyin's foot injury was no longer a problem, and that she had stayed at home for a week, she insisted on dragging her out for a walk. Gu Xingyin was somewhat helpless. Even if she said that she felt that it was good to be alone, Sophia felt that she couldn't be like this. You're an 18-year-old girl. Why are you acting like an old lady? Sophia said with a look of disdain. Knowing that she was doing this for her own good, Gu Xingyin could only helplessly let her do as she pleased. The security in the imperial capital had always been good, so the two didn't let anyone accompany them, and went shopping and eating by themselves. But in this world, there were always so many coincidences. For example, Sophia and Gu Xingyin had been on this road countless times, and had never encountered any problems. Today, however, they were stopped by someone. It was 3 tall men. Of course, for a mermaid, any man was tall. The man in front had bulging muscles and a fierce expression on his face. He didn't look like a decent person. Sophia and Gu Xingyin weren't afraid. The laws of the empire were very strict, especially those related to the merfolk. These 3 people shouldn't have the guts to touch them, unless they were tired of living. Sophia had a fiery temper. She glared at them and said, "You are blocking the way of us sisters." The man in the lead smiled and said, "It's fate that we just happened to bump into each other on such a wide road. 2 little beauties. Would you like to do us the honor of having a drink with us?" It was obvious that he was teasing her. When the man spoke, his eyes fell on Gu Xingyin. Obviously, he was interested in her. Sophia was infuriated when she heard that. To be honest, they had studied in the mermaid school since childhood and learned the art of etiquette. When they went out, most of them were followed by their families. It could be said that they had never encountered such a shameless person. Sophia said angrily, "Who wants to go out for a drink with you? Get out of my way." The 3 of them clearly did not intend to do as she wished. Seeing that the leader was about to walk towards the 2 of them, the surrounding people had already sensed that something was wrong. A passerby frowned and walked over. "What are you doing?" The men of the empire had been taught since childhood that merfolk needed to be protected. It didn't matter if they were familiar or unfamiliar. So when the man sensed that something was wrong and saw that there were only 2 merfolk companions on the side, he quickly walked over, afraid that they would be taken advantage of. Chapter 1523. Before the 3 men could speak, Sophia shouted, "These 3 men are blocking our way. They want us to accompany them for a drink." Her loud shout attracted some people who were walking on the road and didn't notice the situation here. 2 petite and beautiful mermaids were facing off against 3 ferocious-looking men who didn't look like good guys. Thinking back to the words just now, good heavens, someone was bullying mermaids. In an instant, the 3 men realized that at least a dozen people were walking towards them with unfriendly expressions. "Damn it! Who told you to shout?" The man in the lead was obviously a little irritable. At this time, the enthusiastic passerby from before had already come to their side. Hearing the man swear, his expression turned ugly. "You guys, you're all men bullying 2 mermaids. Don't you have any shame? Swearing, where's your upbringing?" Someone behind the man in the lead scolded. "Damn it! What does this have to do with you? You're a dog trying to catch a mouse." Before he could finish, the passerby had already rushed forward and punched him hard. At the same time, the rest of the passers-by also arrived. When they saw the fight, they all swarmed towards the 3 men to beat them up. Because it was obvious that the 3 guys who didn't look like good guys were making things difficult for the 2 mermaids. Gu Xingyin looked at this scene and really wanted to walk away. But these enthusiastic people were obviously helping out for the 2 of them, so she had to say thank you first. She thought that the crowd would at least teach them a lesson and leave. Who knew that they didn't seem to be satisfied and beat the 3 of them for a long time. Gu Xingyin was dumbfounded. According to this beating, even if a genetically enhanced human body was very strong, she was afraid that they would have to lie in the hospital for a long time. In the end, it was the patrolling inspectors of the capital who separated the crowd. "What's going on? What's going on?" Several inspectors with weapons drove over in a hover car and forcibly separated the crowd. Gu Xingyin finally saw the 3 men. Very good, with this appearance, their wives probably wouldn't recognize them when they got home. Oh no, mermaids were very precious. These 3, at a glance, were obviously unmarried. The inspector's expression was very bad. The capital was the safest place in the Casso Empire. There had almost never been such a rough fight. It was still a battle of numbers. He scolded the passers-by. "What are you doing? Gathering a crowd to fight, right? You all want to go with me, right? Today Comrade Inspector." Gu Xingyin walked in front of the inspector who was educating the crowd and interrupted him. At first, the inspector was very unhappy that his words were interrupted, but when he saw that the other party was a very beautiful mermaid, his expression eased a little. Gu Xingyin looked very apologetic. She explained, Actually, these big brothers are trying to stand up for us sisters. She briefly recounted what had happened. After hearing her words, the expression on the inspector's face became even colder. But this time it was directed at the three who were beaten up. I was wondering why such a thing would happen. So it turns out that you guys are capable? Bullying mermaids? Your mother really gave birth to you for nothing. I thought you were unlucky before, but now I think you deserve it. After scolding for a while, he turned around and apologized to the passers-by with a smile on his face. I'm sorry, everyone. I didn't know earlier and wronged you. The others expressed their understanding. 20 chapters. Please subscribe with book coins. Chapter 1524. A few inspectors took the three of them one by one and threw them into the hover car after locking them up. They said that they would bring them back for ideological education. The passers-by saw that the matter was settled and left one by one. However, Gu Xingyin and Sophia were stopped by the inspector who had scolded them earlier. I say, you two little girls, you two mermaids have to be careful when you go out. Don't you have any elders or brothers to accompany you? Although the quality of our empire's people is generally very high, there are bound to be a few black sheep. Don't take any chances. Sophia looked at Gu Xingyin with a pained expression and secretly winked at her. Gu Xingyin's expression was calm, but she sighed in her heart. This inspector uncle is really eloquent. Thank you for your concern. I will be careful in the future and not let her go out alone. A cold voice came from the side. It attracted Gu Xingyin's attention and successfully interrupted the inspector's chatter. The inspector turned his head and stared at the face that he had only seen on the news with his mouth agape. Marshal. He couldn't help but swallow his saliva. This was excitement. He actually saw the marshal. However, he reacted in the next second. What did the marshal just say? The inspector's heart skipped a beat. He saw Marshal Raymond walk to the side of the blonde mermaid. Although his expression was cold, his eyes revealed his concern. Are you all right, Deanna? Gu Xingyin shook her head. I'm fine. Why are you here? Raymond didn't immediately answer her question. Instead, he turned his head and said to the inspector, Can I take my fiancée and her friend away now? The inspector wanted to say no. He needed the two young ladies to take a statement. However, facing the marshal's extremely oppressive gaze, he found that he couldn't say no. In the end, he could only nod with difficulty and say, yes. Raymond reached out his hand and held Gu Xingyin's hand. He turned his head and said softly, Let's go. Gu Xingyin could almost feel Sophia's gossipy gaze. She could only calmly follow Redmond as Sophia hurriedly followed behind them. When they got into Raymond's hover car, he asked them where they were going. Gu Xingyin saw that he was going to send them there. She quickly said, Actually, we don't have a destination. We're just strolling around. We're going to eat something. She was obviously trying to evade the responsibility. Redmond nodded. That's great. I haven't had lunch yet either. Let's go together. Gu Xingyin secretly held her forehead. She said with a headache, You're dressed like this, and you have such a recognizable face. You'll definitely be recognized. Her intention was to tell Raymond that it would be inconvenient. Redmond, on the other hand, had a matter-of-fact look on his face. So what if I'm recognized? Is there a problem with me eating with my fiancé? Gu Xingyin found herself speechless. All right, she could only say in her heart, you can do whatever you want. However, she didn't see the slight smile on Raymond's face. Raymond realized that he had some dark thoughts in his heart. For example, he liked to see Deanna's reluctant but helpless expression when she could only go along with him. Her little face was red and slightly puffed up. She was simply too cute. Chapter 1525. The communicator in Gu Xingyin's hand rang. She opened it and saw that it was a message from Sophia. Marshal Raymond, you're so cool. She looked helplessly at Sophia, who was sitting beside her. As expected, she saw that Sophia was looking at her with sparkling eyes. Sophia winked at Gu Xingyin when she saw Sophia looking at her. Another message came in. You're really full of boyfriend power. Gu Xingyin put away her communicator and ignored Sophia. Raymond stopped the hover car at a place. He opened the car door for them and said, "This is a place that I often come to. The food here is not bad." Sophia looked at the signboard and thought to herself, "This is a place that requires money and power. You even have to line up to eat here. Of course, the food here is good." As expected, following the marshal is the best way to eat. Raymond said that he did not care about being discovered, but he still took Gu Xingyin's feelings into consideration and found a place that was impossible to be photographed. They all had a meal. To be honest, in terms of taste alone, the food here was the best Gu Xingyin had ever tasted in this world. However, after all, she had experienced so many worlds and tasted so many different delicacies, so she didn't feel much about it. However, it was different for Sophia. Gu Xingyin looked at the young lady as if she was about to cry. She could not help but ask, "Sophia, what's wrong?" Sophia looked up at her with teary eyes. "It's really, really delicious." Gu Xingyin was speechless. "Sure." She suddenly thought of her master-level cooking skills and said, "The next time you come to my house, I'll cook for you." Sophia took a sip of fruit juice and looked at Gu Xingyin in surprise. "You know how to cook, Diana?" Gu Xingyin nodded. "What's so strange about that?" "Of course it's strange." Sophia felt that it was an extremely difficult thing to do. Gu Xingyin could not understand why the people in this world had evolved to such a high level in terms of physical strength and intelligence. However, when it came to food, they had completely regressed. Sophia said in disbelief, "But Diana, I've never seen you cook before." Gu Xingyin smiled confidently. "Then you can eat your fill." Sophia's eyes lit up. As Diana's best friend for more than 10 years, she knew that her best friend would never say anything that she was not confident in. Even Diana said that she could eat good food. Sophia decided without hesitation. "What's the next time? Why don't we do it today?" Gu Xingyin was speechless. At this time, a piece of tissue was handed over from the side. It was Raymond. He had been paying attention to Gu Xingyin all this time. When he saw that she had finished eating, he handed him a tissue from beside him. Sophia looked at him with stars in her eyes. Who would have thought that such a cold person like Marshal Raymond would be so attentive? If this scene were to be spread out, who knew how many mermaids in the empire would cry out of jealousy? Gu Xingyin wiped the corner of her mouth and heard Raymond say, "My mother wants to see you." "What?" Gu Xingyin froze for a moment before she reacted. "Ah, when I'm ready, I'll pay her a visit." Chapter 1526. Raymond coughed in a low voice. Gu Xingyin swore that from her angle, she must have seen Raymond smile. Raymond said, "My mother isn't old. Also, she wouldn't like to be called an old lady." Gu Xingyin blinked a few times before realizing that Madame Raymond was still a young lady based on the average lifespan of humans in this world. She said apologetically, "Sorry, I misspoke." "You don't have to apologize to me," Raymond said in a low voice. "Huh." Gu Xingyin looked at him in confusion. Raymond looked at her deeply and said, "I can tolerate everything about you." Gu Xingyin's face turned red again. Sophia couldn't help but cover her chest with her hand. God, Marshal Raymond is so handsome, so cool, and so powerful. But why is it that he's better than most men when he's saying sweet nothings with a cold face? Such a man was simply an existence that could force all the other men in the world to death. Compared to her fiancé Earl Allen, who only knows how to say "I like you," he's nothing but trash. Sophia expressed that she was hurt. Raymond couldn't help but smile when he saw Gu Xingyin blush again. "You look beautiful in this outfit." Gu Xingyin looked up blankly, indicating that she couldn't keep up with his pace. Raymond said the rest of his words. "My mother will like it." Gu Xingyin didn't know how the conversation went, but when she reacted, she had already agreed to go to Raymond's house. She calmed down and realized that she couldn't run away anymore. She could only think of a way and said, "Raymond, Cager." Seeing Raymond's gaze, she changed the way she addressed him. "Should we prepare a gift first?" Raymond nodded. Although his mother wouldn't care, he hoped that Diana would leave a perfect impression in her heart when they first met. He said to Gu Xingyin, "My mother likes necklaces." Gu Xingyin had also heard of this. Women generally liked beautiful jewelry, and there would definitely be a type that they adored. Mrs. Raymond was famous for her love of necklaces. Gu Xingyin went to a very famous jewelry store. After choosing for a long time, she finally found a suitable one. Sophia, who was following behind her, was not nervous at all. She was currently in a state of extreme excitement. Raymond was worried that Gu Xingyin would be nervous, so he invited her over as a guest. Thinking that she was about to go to Marshal Raymond's house, Sophia felt as though she was flying. When they arrived at the Redmond house, Mrs. Redmond, who had already received the news, was waiting for them at the door. She looked at the two young girls who got out of the car. She glanced around and her eyes fell on Gu Xingyin. "This is Miss Leonard, right?" she said with a smile. She was indeed a rare beauty. She secretly gave her son a look of approval. "Good taste." Raymond corrected her. "It's Deanna." Sensing Mrs. Redmond's teasing gaze, Gu Xingyin had to show a shy expression. "Hello, Mrs. Redmond." She handed over the gift in her hand. Mrs. Redmond looked at her with a smile. "Cager already told me to call you Deanna, and you still call me Mrs. Redmond." Chapter 1527. Gu Xingyin paused for a second. Looking at the beautiful and gentle face of the lady in front of her, she softly called out, "Auntie." Mrs. Raymond smiled and hurriedly welcomed them in. Of course, she did not forget Sophia. With just a few words, Sophia looked at her with admiration. They sat down in the living room, and Madame Raymond got up to prepare snacks and drinks. When she came out, Gu Xingyin saw that Madame Raymond was wearing the necklace she bought. She felt a little warm in her heart. Although it was not a big deal, it was clear that Madame Raymond gave her enough respect. Meeting Gu Xingyin's gaze, Madame Raymond smiled and said, "I like the necklace you bought at first sight. I feel that it matches my dress very well. Deanna's taste is really good." Gu Xingyin smiled. Madame Raymond was a very knowledgeable and humorous woman. Chatting with her was simply a pleasure. Regardless of whether it was elegant art or common jokes, she was able to chat about it. Sophia looked at Madame Raymond with sparkling eyes and sincerely praised. "You really are an amazing woman, Madame Raymond." Madame Raymond couldn't help but cover her mouth and laugh. "My dear Sophia, your little mouth is really sweet." She then regretfully sighed. "My life can be considered wonderful. If I have to say what is not perfect, it would be that I lack a lovely daughter like you." Madame Raymond was very satisfied with Gu Xingyin. While chatting, she had been observing Gu Xingyin. Soon, she realized that there was nothing to nitpick about this young lady, whether it was her knowledge, her speech, or her bearing. In fact, this kind of perfect woman would easily make people feel bored. But this Leonard family's young miss was different. Her character was naive and charming. Although her bearing was perfect, her actions were not rigid, but full of enthusiasm and vitality. Chatting with her was very easy. Madame Raymond could not help but look at her son, who had been silently sitting on the side listening to their conversation. Such a quiet person. How did he find such a lovely wife after so long? Raymond received his mother's disdainful look, but he calmly pretended not to see it. In any case, since he was young, he had received countless similar gazes. His mother always protected her son in front of outsiders, but behind closed doors, she completely disliked him. When chatting with like-minded people, time always passed quickly. Raymond looked at the time. Madame Raymond noticed her action and realized that it was already late. She said to the two with an apologetic tone, "Look at me, I was happy and actually let you sit here for a few hours. Do you want me to let Cager take you around?" Gu Xingyin hearing this and laughed. "How is it empty? I feel that chatting with Auntie is much more interesting than wandering around outside." She was talking with this madam. It was it, of course. Raymond could tell that she wasn't lying, and the smile on his face became even more genuine. No matter what kind of situation it was, people would always have a good impression of like-minded people. Chapter 1528. At this moment, Raymond suddenly spoke. "Mother, actually, Deanna has prepared another gift recently." Mrs. Raymond tilted her head with interest. Oh, Gu Xingyin also looked at Raymond. She didn't understand why Raymond would say that. Then she felt a grip on her hand. Redmond had pulled her out of the door. Mrs. Raymond saw this scene and couldn't help but laugh. Why are you being so secretive? She hid the surprise in her eyes. Every mother understood their children the most. She knew that Cager didn't like to interact with others. Now he actually took the initiative to hold Deanna's hand. It seemed that Cager liked Deanna more than she thought. Thinking of this, the smile on Mrs. Raymond's face deepened. She was happy for her son. It wasn't easy to find a partner that he truly liked. Gu Xingyin was led outside by Raymond. She said in confusion, I didn't prepare a second gift for Auntie. Raymond looked at her and said, You said you were good at cooking. Gu Xingyin, Raymond continued. You said you could cook for Sophia. Sophia said it would be best if you could cook for her today. Gu Xingyin was dumbfounded. I said when we get back to my house. Raymond said faintly, but you're definitely going to have dinner at my house tonight. Gu Xingyin wanted to say something, but Raymond stopped her with one sentence. I've never eaten your cooking. Gu Xingyin didn't know why, but she felt that she could hear a trace of grievance in Raymond's tone. She was completely defeated. Okay, tell me, what do you like to eat? I like to eat you. Raymond glanced at her silently. Then, under Gu Xingyin's puzzled gaze, he casually said 2 dishes. Gu Xingyin carefully noted it down and asked Mrs. Raymond and Sophia. Hearing that Gu Xingyin was going to personally cook, Mrs. Raymond showed great interest. Regarding this, Gu Xingyin was very confident. After all, her culinary skills were not bad, and she had unlocked the master cooking skill. Even in other worlds where delicacies were everywhere, her culinary skills could be considered top-notch, let alone in this world where food was made by robots. In order to express that it was really a surprise, Gu Xingyin brought Raymond to the living room while she busied herself in the kitchen. Other than the servants who occasionally went in to help, no one knew what she was doing inside. As for the servant, Gu Xingyin also warned her not to tell anyone. The servant knew that she would be the future mistress of the Redmond household, and naturally agreed. He had been busy for almost 2 hours. Gu Xingyin directed 10 or so servants to put 10 or so dishes on the table. Each dish was covered with a thick lid, so no one could see what was inside. Wow, Deanna, you actually made so much. Sophia was surprised. Gu Xingyin smiled. Since it's a surprise, of course I have to make more. When she said this, she glanced at Redmond. Mrs. Raymond was clearly very interested in what was under the lid. She asked Gu Xingyin for her opinion. Can we open it now? Gu Xingyin nodded and smiled. Of course. You're tuning in to the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.